Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. Today we turn our attention to the Sky game and week 12, which gets underway on Friday. Today I am joined by Luke. My name is Joe, by the way. I always forget to say my own name here, but my name is Joe and joining me is Luke. Luke, how are you?
I'm good. Just trying to recover after a poor fantasy week, but I'm keen to get back into it as usual.
Yes, no, we were discussing before we came on air. I've even put in my notes. Joe's team will discuss that I'm struggling. Well, I'm struggling, but I mean, you say you're struggling as well by your standards, and also very many people in FPL, Sky, whatever, all formats, they're all struggling at the moment because the players we're backing aren't doing what they're supposed to do, and in Sky, that also means they're not scoring, they're not assisting, but they're not doing some other things as well. They're not getting those passing and tackling, all those types. You were talking on air, off air just before. Do you want to elaborate on that? Why it is that some of the popular picks aren't performing as they should be in Sky this year?
Yeah, so it's been really tough to be honest with you. I mean, going into the season, we had a slight rule change in the way that people sort of score their points. So it was a bit up in the air in terms of whether forwards were going to be better value this year because defenders absolutely cleaned up last season. So when we go into the season thinking that our premium defenders should be good picks, it's usually because not only do they get the clean sheets like they were doing last year, which isn't happening in either format, obviously. For Man City and Liverpool, I'm mainly talking here.
Yeah.
But they've struggled with a passing bonus as well, which was obviously the thing they fell back in to often get you sort of 10 points in a game, or even if they didn't keep a clean sheet, often 5 points. And it's not until recently that they've started to creep back in some of the players, but Liverpool's passing numbers have been down in general. Man City, we've obviously been robbed of Laporte, which has caused all sorts of issues there. For their defence. And as a result, it's also affected goalkeepers. Alisson was incredibly strong pick last season. Obviously, we were robbed of him too. So there's not been many standout picks at the back. And then as a result, we've kind of put all our money into these premium forwards, or a lot of the top players have anyway. And to begin with, that looked like a pretty good strategy. They were returning pretty well. They were getting this shots on target bonus, which was really helping their sort of captain haul. But they've kind of dried up a little bit too. So it's a concern. I think many of the good options seem to be very, very cheap. And that sort of causes confusion as to what to do with all this money. I think you were saying, Joe, yourself, you've got quite a lot of money in the bank at the moment. I'm not sure.
I didn't even know. It was like, what's that in my wallet kind of thing? And it's like, it happens to be 3.3 million. I never would do that in other formats, but for some reason this season in Sky, I'm just like, what? So the moves I kind of want to make, I can do, but I didn't think I could. And as you said, so at the back we've got some of those at Soyuncu as well, Soyuncu rather, I should say. Has been excellent, I think, for Leicester. Here's a good way of looking at that. So this is a good way of looking at our team. So at the moment I've got the fixtures up on the screen, and we see that it's important to have a Leicester player if you can, because it's only Southampton v Leicester in the opening fixture. So I think that's a good move to have a captain for that day. But we're going to put your team up as well. Now you've got hopeful, Soyuncu there, and we can see an 8 points by him. And I've got Soyuncu as well in my team, and I looked at my Sky team the next day, and I was thinking, how have I got all those points from him? I understand why I haven't got points from the likes of, say, De Bruyne or Sterling, or McGinn, but So tell me about Soyuncu, and tell me perhaps a bit about some of the bonus stars that we should be looking at the moment.
Yeah, so he's a prime pick at the moment. Probably one of the few people who seems to just be able to hit those numbers fairly consistently. He's incredibly cheap. First of all, at 6.2 million, and last week against Burnley, he's managed to hit tier 2 tackles and tier 2 passes. So despite not keeping that clean sheet, there he is with 8 points, and it's exactly that I was talking at the beginning that we had before with the likes of Van Dijk, coupled usually with a clean sheet, which made them so good. So he's still a great pick because of his value and his just ability to find these extra points. So he offers actually a pretty good captain to cover those Leicester game days. because you'd expect that even if they concede, he'll probably get points. So although they have got two game days, Leicester, actually, which are quite interesting for a captain, there isn't really a massive need, I would say, to get a Maddison or Vardy. By all means, they could also be fantastic picks and could quite easily outscore him. But if you're not sitting with those players in your team already, you probably have to question whether it's worth using a transfer and then potentially using another one out if you didn't want a Leicester player long term, when Soyuncu seems more than capable to do the job. So yeah, I'm probably just going to stick with him. I don't know if you've got any plans to bring a different Leicester player in.
Yeah, no, I've got him. I've just to correct myself briefly. It was actually a picture of my team we've got up on the screen there, so it's just it's useful for people to see. It's just an example of a typical team, whether they're doing as badly as me or they're doing as well as you, or as well in comparison to me. Soyuncu is definitely a player to get in at that price, and yeah, if someone's getting 8 points just for turning up, then they're the kind of player I want in Sky.
Indeed, and I mean the fact that he actually turns up is another good point. That's another area where we've struggled, I think, compared to FPL, because at least in FPL you've got the likes of John Lundstrom, who just appears from nowhere off of your bench and can cover miraculously all these players. Whereas in Sky, you don't have any bench, so I used a whole host of transfers this weekend, mainly in rage, I would say, for the fact that I had Aguero, Mahrez, Otamendi, Zinchenko, Sterling, Kevin De Bruyne for Man City, and only a few of them turned up. So that's another reason why the players like Soyuncu and Vardy and stuff look to be good picks, because you can rely on them to start every game. So it's something I'm trying to move my team a little bit more towards, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
Fed up with the rotation.
Well, let's have a look at the Sky bonus. So who's top of that at the moment? I don't know if you want to go through some of those names there. So we can see Soyuncu up there as well. Yeah. Do you want to talk about some of those other players as well?
Okay, are you looking at the whole season or just the last 4 weeks, Joe?
This is looking at the last 4 game weeks as well. So I tend to look at the last 4 weeks because it's quite a good guide of recent form. And 2 weeks I don't think it's enough, and more than 4 weeks it starts getting a bit long term. But yeah,
definitely. And there's some familiar names up there. I mean, I don't think anyone would have said that Fernandinho and Jorginho wouldn't be in and around. They always are. They obviously get that through their passing. I don't particularly think they're great picks. They can do a job. But the ones that kind of stand out to me, firstly, we've already said Soyuncu, straight up there, 11 points just from bonus in the last 4 games. Incredible, really. The same as 2 goals for a striker. And then you've got Ricardo Pereira, who's slightly more expensive than Soyuncu, but he just finds he's always been a very good player in Sky because of the amount of tackles he gets. So I really do think it is a good option to even double up. I'm pretty sure I'm saying he's actually the top scorer in Sky, defender in Sky, I mean. So I really rate him too. I think that Felipe Anderson is often on here, strangely, for tackles. Seems to put a shift in, but I wouldn't really consider him. But the other name that really stands out to me, or the 2 names really, are Robertson, who seems to be coming back into a little bit of form in terms of Sky, also with assists in general play. Because the beginning of the season, Trent's 9.9 million, so he's cheaper than Robertson. Obviously offers that attacking threat, started off well, and Van Dijk always offered you that passing bonus pretty much every match. But Robertson seems to have taken the mantle a little bit. He's adding assists and he's often getting past. He can get passing or tackles. So I think he's a key option to look at as Liverpool's fixtures change. A good idea to bring him into the fold. And the real cheap one as well that is also good in FPL is Mr. Tomori, who manages to get bonus 2 to go with his cheap price. So can't argue against him either. I think those are the standout picks for me.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of kicked myself not looking at players like Tomori as well. I mean, while we're chatting as well, people can see I've just got your team back on the screen. It disappeared for some reason, so I thought we'd get it back. Because we could see there you've still got Gilbert as well, looking good for his value at the moment. But is he cutting it with the bonus as well?
He hasn't really. I mean, we expected this guy to get tackles given his previous record. I think he had a really high average before when he was out on loan. He's come back into our league and he's not really managed the tackles, surprisingly. However, because of his cheap price, the fact that he even takes to the pitch makes him a pretty good option because he's the cheapest player in the game at 4.5 million. He's also got a couple of assists so far this season as well. So he still remains a good pick, more because of what he allows elsewhere. However, tricky schedule coming up, so I wouldn't be expecting too many points from him over the next few. But it's what he allows elsewhere, basically. So I think most people have either got him or Dan Burn in their team to kind of fill that role.
Yeah, I've got him in my team as well, and Dan Burn in my sort of second team, which is performing a little bit better at the moment. In terms of Sky bonus, just to go back to that list again, Robertson there. So we'll go back to your team. So we can see Robertson's there. He's cutting it in terms of the bonus, and we go back to your team there, and I like the look of that. So I've got Alexander-Arnold, but you've got Alexander-Arnold and Robertson and Alisson. So you've really gone for that as well. Could you explain a bit about why you think it's quite a good idea not only to have a Liverpool double up, but a Liverpool treble up at the back, and why Robertson is a must-own at this stage?
I mean, I suppose you can question must-own because he is very expensive. I just personally have faith that Liverpool are probably the best team in the league in terms of clean sheets. I know they haven't necessarily been showing that, but I think they've got a good run coming up. And I just think that they're going to turn it around in that area. I can't see how they won't. And with Alisson's return, which obviously I think that will help to shore that up as well. It's also a factor is we're coming up into the Christmas schedule pretty soon. And Robertson is just one of those guys who pretty much doesn't have any competition. You'd expect to play nearly every game. So kind of adds that security. And like you say, most people are going to have probably have Trent, maybe have Van Dijk as well. So if I can get the triple clean sheet and change that shield into a sword with Alisson, then that's kind of what I'm aiming for. The other factor there and the thought process behind Alisson was just how good he was last year, and this year we haven't really been presented with a standout keeper pick. I think at the moment Dean Henderson is topped by about 10 points over Edison, who's considerably more expensive than him. After that, you've kind of just got a whole host of keepers. Pope's kind of dropped off of late, not getting many clean sheets. So I just thought, it's the extra 2 points you get for a clean sheet from a keeper that really interests me. So, it's a bit of a risk to go triple, but I'm confident that will work out in the long term.
Yeah, and I think it's good. I mean, I'll quickly put my team up after seeing your one. So this is what a good team looks like, and then I'll put my team up. So mine's the one with Pope in goal, and so that's an area I'm looking at. Henderson does appeal, but I think I'm sort of shifting a Pope for another Pope. I feel, and Alisson and Edison, I think are probably still the best bets, and I think I should have stuck with Edison on my overhaul there. Pope hasn't really done it for me. As I was talking about, I've got McGinn. I've accidentally got 3 million in the bank. So McGinn to Robertson, for me, looks like a good move. And it's probably the move I'm going to make on Sunday. But we're going to talk about what we're doing for this weekend in a moment. Just go back to the fixtures as well, so we can get some idea of what's coming up for us. And we've had some questions in, which is good. What we're going to do in this video in future will be far more organised and getting lots of questions out. But luckily, Sky Player in FPL has been on hand to ask us some questions. And I think they're quite pertinent, some of them. So I'll just kind of go through them and see what you think of these, Luke. So which City players do we stick with? So this is the big question I think the FPL players have to face and Sky players have to face, whatever the format is. Man City players going to be expensive, but they can really deliver and they can also really let you down. So what do you think about going forward for Man City players in Sky?
It's an incredibly tricky one to answer, isn't it? We're trying to predict Pepe here. I honestly think, certainly long term, and I've used a little bit more transfers than I wanted to on that particular team I've showed you, so I'm going to go into a state of hibernation here. So I like who I've got, really. I've got Sterling and De Bruyne. I feel like Sterling's, arguably the most nailed on player from the front three. So I think that's one way to get into their goals. Hopefully, he'll start more than often. I think there is a case for Aguero, but as we've seen recently, he's been suffering from rotation, and Pep's obviously made these comments that Jesus could play in certain games. So if I had Aguero, I'd certainly be keeping him for these 2 home games, but after that, I'd probably look to shift elsewhere, just to someone who you know is going to play every week, because I think it's just a little bit too much stress, especially when you don't always get to see the lineup. So captaining Aguero on a certain match day and they're not the first people to play, you're just going to have your heart in your mouth every single week. I think De Bruyne is pretty much close to essential across all the fantasy games, I would suspect. So I definitely look at him. And then there's Otamendi. I think Otamendi's still a good pick as long as he's in the team. We don't kind of know that yet, but if he takes to the field, it's similar to Van Dijk of the pass and stuff. He's always been really good for that passing bonus, and he obviously has a goal threat as well. So if he can get back into the starting 11, then I still think he's a good pick. Aside from those three, and maybe arguably Edison, I don't think there's too many. David Silva's obviously still a great pick, but the problem is the price difference in Sky between David Silva and your premium. I mean, he is a premium midfielder in Sky, basically, means that it's probably not worth it. In FPL, you're looking at, if you choose him over De Bruyne or Sterling, a ridiculous amount of saving, like 5 million even. Whereas here, the price structure is a bit more squeezed. So I would argue he's probably not as good a pick.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've looked at him, but I've always rejected David Silva in Sky just because with Sky I tend to like nailed on players. But I'll put my team back on screen shortly. But I've got Aguero there, and it's been really letting me down with the fact that Jesus seems to have been preferred in some of the away games, particularly away games where Jesus has performed better before. So, for example, he scored at Everton before. He therefore started at Goodison Park again this season. But we've got 2 good home games coming up, so I'm going to hang on to Aguero for those 2, just to see where we're at, and then it's time for him to go for the likes of Salah or Mane. I think it's time for move for me with Man City. I like them at the moment. Just load up, get them all, but be prepared to move them on. And I think it's Man City to Liverpool in 2 or 3 game weeks. I think 2 or 3 weeks would be. For me, would be the best move the way my team's set up as well. We've already covered one of the questions you've gone on about Alisson there, so we're pretty keen on him, and especially with the likes of Pope not performing as we'd hope. But just one vowel difference between the next one, Pope to Pepe, we've got here. So is Pepe still worth considering? I've had him in my team, and I've promptly ditched him a week or 2 ago. I think that was the same case with you as well, but yeah, if anyone's still got Pepe in the team, should they hang on or time to go?
I think throw your team out the window and set it on fire if it's still got Pepe, and it's been that bad. This guy's had all the potential in the world. He came in priced so cheaply, similar to when Salah first joined in Sky. He was a midfielder and extremely cheap, around the same price, and that was in his first season. We all know how that turned out. So, coupled with the fact that he looked a great pick because you could put the captain armband on him so many times if you wanted to avoid the Aubameyang, it just looks all set up for him. But he's just struggled, as we know. I think the guy's got 1 or 2 assists. He got 1 penalty, which was given to him as a favour, I think, and then
it's like a pity penalty, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Embarrassing.
And he's picked up, I think it's maybe even only 1 assist in Sky, because obviously they're a little bit more stringent. It could be 2. But he's only 2 points better off than Guendouzi. And Guendouzi is like 7 million. And to add to that, you'd think, well, Guendouzi's probably getting passing bonus then. That's why he's sort of matching him. No, he's got passing bonus twice in 9 weeks. So that is how bad Pepe's been as a pick.
Gosh.
Having said that, when you watch the guy, he still heavily looks involved. So it's just, can he turn it around? Maybe. I still actually have him in my other team. So I have kept faith with him in that team. Because it still kind of makes sense on paper, but I'm at a loss now. I think I'm going to have to cut him.
Yeah, I mean, I cut him a couple of weeks ago when De Bruyne had his injury, and what I did is I moved De Bruyne to, I think it was Mason Mount, hence me having suddenly 3 million in my bank account.
Right.
And then when De Bruyne was back, so I kept playing Pepe, and then when De Bruyne was back, I moved De Bruyne in for Pepe. So I did that kind of move there, and that's a typical kind of move in Sky. Really, you're trying to get 2 games for 1, 3 games for 1 if you can. So next question is, going forwards, are there any good? You looked at the fixtures. Are there any good sort of 2 for 1 types of moves? And these are where you're getting those 2 games, 3 games for a player that might ordinarily get 1.
Now, I've personally kind of ignored these for a while because, like I said, I've used a few transfers and I feel like I want to get my team structure safe and just kind of hibernate. So I'm not really looking at any myself, to be honest with you, especially when a lot of the time said to you, the rotation's been killing us. So often it's worked doing this with these heavy hitters. But if that involves usually a Man City player in the equation, which is, was supposed to be a good thing, it's backfired quite often because they've not taken to the field. So the only one I've sort of was eyeing up is there's actually a Leicester double and a West Ham double coming up. So Leicester play on Friday, and then West Ham will play this Saturday, and then West Ham again play Saturday the next week, and then Leicester play away to Palace the week after. Ooh. So there is, if for people, I'm not sure it's worth it with Soyuncu unless you can move to one of the attacking options. But for example, a Vardy to a Haller for 2 weeks, or a Yarmolenko, or a Maddison to a Yarmolenko, or if you can do it, Soyuncu to one of those for two could be pretty good because, like I say, you're getting that complete two matches for free almost. And you don't necessarily have to move back to the Leicester player if you don't want to. So it's just something to consider.
Yeah, because I've got Maddison, and that would work with me. Maddison to Yarmolenko, for example. Maddison last year was great. He was a bit like Soyuncu, just turns up, gets points. Is he a bit like that this season, or not quite?
He's kind of promised. He's kind of promised, and he's done okay in a couple of games. But overall, he hasn't really. Because he takes a lot of shots, so you would have thought he was getting the shots on target bonus, but he's not really lived up to it. I heard he's kind of carrying a knock at the moment, which is maybe a slight concern. But I think if you've got, so you said you've got Maddison there, see how he does against Southampton. Consider moving to Yarmolenko or someone like that for West Ham's double. Both games at home, against Sheffield United and Newcastle, and then Leicester play again on the Sunday versus Palace. So you can look at maybe bringing Maddison in, or the better option I think is if you're not looking to him, you're looking just to get rid of him, you can look at Yarmolenko for 2 games while you kind of work with more information who you actually want for that role. So I think that's an option.
No, well that's given me something to think about. It's something I had not considered before. So thanks a lot for that. Before we go, let's go back to our teams and see what we're doing immediately. For those fixtures coming. So you've made some changes and you're looking to kind of consolidate, but let's get your team back up here. So you've got at the moment Alisson, Robertson, Alexander-Arnold, Soyuncu, Gilbert, and you've got De Bruyne, Hudson-Odoi, that's an interesting one, we'll come back to that in a sec, Mason Mount, Aubameyang, Sterling and Mane, so a broad mixture there. Who there looks like there might be for the chop and who might come in?
Well, the only players I've really got concerns about at the moment, I would say, is what are only slight concerns because, like I said, I made whole fire transfers just before we've done this video. So the only ones I've really got concerns about, I've got a slight one about Mason Mount. He got subbed early last week, and I don't know whether this is the beginning of something with Mount. It might just be my fear of how fantasy's been going at the moment, but there's a lot of people who can kind of fulfill the role he's been playing, and he kind of switches positions. Sometimes he's been out on the left, sometimes he's been number 10, sometimes he's been sat a little bit deeper. So with Loftus-Cheek also due back, I want to say fairly soon, but I guess I don't know. And then Barkley seemingly looking a little bit better, he did for England anyway. And then Pulisic as well coming back into the fold and looked decent. I think actually Mount got subbed for Pulisic, if I'm not mistaken, last week, and he did well. So I'm going to monitor him. If he suddenly starts getting dropped or rotated or early subs and the returns kind of dip out, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. His price is quite tricky and my structure is quite fixed. So that's a real concern. But I don't need to worry about that yet. No. The only other person really is Aubameyang, who is kind of frustrating, really. I think most of the top players have got them in his team because of that coverage for the captains. However, he's just kind of dipped over the last couple of games, and he's not even returning the shots on target, which is the worry. So you kind of basically get a complete blank. However, his ownership is so high, and he still maintains, not for a little while actually, it's not until I think 4th of December or 5th of December, something like that. He's then got a single match day, and then he's got another single match day in December. So you have to be a brave person to really transfer him out, and then probably have to transfer him back in to cover those single match days. So you really have to back whoever you're bringing in to sort of cover the next month to outscore him. So I'm not sure it's worth it. I think maybe I'm just going to have to leave him and just whatever he gets is whatever he gets. It'll be the same as everyone else. And the only other person I'd probably consider is Tammy, because Tammy Abraham, because he's just hitting shots on target even when he doesn't score. You go back to that bonus before, he was heavily figuring there, which is it's always nice just to get points even if they don't do anything.
Yeah. Now, you've got Hudson-Odoi. Slight concerns at the moment about Mounts. Have you got Hudson-Odoi in as a it's good to have a Chelsea midfielder, particularly one like him, in just in case you want to get rid of Mount and you've still got that coverage there, and it's a good coverage.
Yeah, indeed, and he was basically the reason what managed to fund my move for Robertson. I had Mahrez in his position.
Yeah.
Mahrez obviously didn't play, and then played in the Champions League, and I just felt that if I get Hudson-Odoi in, it means I can then remove the issue that I had in defence with Zinchenko, changing him to Robertson as well. So it just felt all round a really good move. And then if Mount goes off the boil, that's where my concerns will come. There's McGinn, maybe he turns back in, but there's also several cheaper options around that price that are still looking pretty good. I mean, even the likes of Jack Grealish, I know they've got bad games coming up. But there's still a few people that are poking their head in around that area. So, I mean, even Guendouzi, I've already talked about, if I want Arsenal coverage, if Aubameyang's not cutting it, I can even move to him and then get a better striker for Aubameyang.
Guendouzi, as you were discussing, is on the passing and tackling side. It's not in the same category, but always in Sky, a very unfashionable player emerges. I like to just call them generically Harry Arter, who was a hero in the Sky game, inexplicably.
Indeed.
One season. Okay, so I'll put my team up. So I do urge people not to copy this, but perhaps
I think you're being harsh.
Listen to how I might change it. So yeah, I've got Pope in goal, Alexander-Arnold, Soyuncu, and Gilbert. I've got De Bruyne, Maddison, Mount, and McGinn, Aguero, Aubameyang, and Sterling. I've got my captaincies at the moment on Maddison and De Bruyne and Aubameyang, but as I've discussed, I really like what you've done there with the Robertson Alexander-Arnold move. I think that can be quite potent because they're both players that can get points by assisting, turning up. They've even got goals in them, as we've seen with Robertson in the Champions League. But I just think they're all round good guys to have in a Sky team. Again, I don't like Villa's fixtures going forwards. I also don't like. I've sort of got too many sort of cheaper mid-priced midfielders as well with my team structure. So it's a structure change really for me. And as I discussed with Aguero, long term I'll be looking to move him on. Sterling and De Bruyne I'm quite happy to keep at the moment. Aubameyang I'm quite happy to keep. But yeah, I share that. I'm not getting the braces out of him even. I'm getting like the odd goal, and it feels like the odd goal. There's been a couple of blanks recently, but yeah, there's possible moves. I've got 32 transfers left. You were saying I think it's it's about 10 is the average. Is that right?
I'm in a couple of groups with a lot of top players, and basically it seems sort of to be around the 10 figure that quite a lot have used. So I think if you're anywhere around that, then you're doing pretty well. Like anything, it's a marathon to go. So
yeah,
it depends what sort of place your team's in. So using them, just as long as you can get to around the overhaul period in February, and you're sitting with around sort of 10 to 15 left, you should be pretty good. So sort of look how many transfers you've got, look at that February period, and you can almost plan nearly all the way up to overhaul. I know we're still waiting for some of the fixtures, but you can go quite a long way. So at least on paper you can get something down. I think that's pretty good idea to do in Sky. Obviously things change very quickly, but it's worth looking at.
The sort of build this show as what do we do with a problem like Man City, and I think for me stick with them and then gradually move to Liverpool, but watch out for the World Club Championship as well when Liverpool are missing out in, I can't remember when that is. It's that early December, isn't it? So I've got sort of one eye on that. We'll see where we go with that. I believe they're going to miss the West Ham game then. So obviously with Sky there's no bench, so you have to use the transfers around that type of move, or just suck it up that you haven't got any player there. But just before we go, no, I really don't like leaving the show with a picture of my team. So we'll put your team back again. So there we go. That looks a bit better. But for now, Luke, thanks so much for joining me. Both of us have got half-termly duties next week, but the next week we'll be back and all prepared for the latest issues, and eventually we'll have worked out a little bit more what to do with those troublesome Man City assets. But for now, Luke, good luck with the week in Sky.
Thanks, Joe. You too. See you, everyone.